Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center is a program we air Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then make available on YouTube after the program for later viewing. And it is sponsored by Fieldstone Memory Care of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care, and they are now accepting residents. Call 360-271-2530 to schedule a tour of Fieldstone's beautifully appointed apartments. They're on Rolling Bay, 360-271-2530. And it's my pleasure to welcome Ann Lovejoy, who is going to lead us in a discussion about holidays and inclusion as part of the Inclusion Study Group series here.
Thank you, Reed. And thanks everybody for showing up when you could be outside enjoying this fresh, breezy autumn day, right? If the power goes out, we will reconvene at another time. But for now, we're going to plow ahead and give it a shot. I welcome again, everybody. And I hope that some of you had a chance to look over a few of the articles I just sent or have had other thoughts about it. I think this is such a fruitful topic because as last few years, we've all been re-examining so many aspects of our dominant culture. And this is a really healthy one to take another look at. For myself, for instance, I really have always loved Halloween, but it's so interesting to delve into the history of Halloween and how it started out in all over the temperate northern hemisphere as a celebration of like driving away the dark, starting to as the dark started to close in. So there were bonfires and people would wear costumes to scare away the wandering ghosts and have treats because they knew they were in for a long, dark 6 months, right? So that's kind of the roots of it. But I think it's so fascinating to see how in America it's turned into a candy holiday. In some places, it's a very important spiritual holiday where the dead are embraced. And like in Mexico, the Day of the Dead really celebrates not the death of all their loved ones, but their lives. And I love the ofrendas full of flowers and leaves and pictures and celebrated with music and wonderful food. And maybe the food is the dominant theme of the holiday. But I'd love to hear from any of you if you've been thinking about a particular holiday or have thoughts about how we could examine them more fruitfully. Is that Marcy? Are you putting your hand up? Or you're muted? You're muted, Marcy. There. Nope, still muted, Marcy.
Not putting up my hand. I was trying to find out who's here so I could say hello.
Oh, well. Bonnie, would you have a question?
Well, this was toward what you had just said, but I read the article on Thanksgiving. And first of all, Thanksgiving's probably been just about my favorite holiday my whole life. And everything about it, the being together, the food, the not having to worry about presents and all, all the complications of a lot of the other holidays. But it was so sad to read that article. It just took the heart out of me of how it was first celebrated, that they had won this battle over, killed 700 indigenous men, women, and children, and came back and wanted to celebrate. And that the Indians, they used that word, that the Indians were not included. They erected an 11-foot fence to keep them out. And I don't know, broke my heart once again. I don't know.
You ruined your Thanksgiving, Ann.
Well, no, but here's the thought. Like, how do we reclaim the thankfulness of Thanksgiving and take it in a different spirit? Because it was actually, I mean, there's kind of a lot of, apparently those pilgrims had a lot of Thanksgiving events, which were not so much parties as spiritual, supposedly, or religious ceremonies of thanks. But in fact, they were about things like defeating the Wampanoag people or, taking away land that wasn't theirs. So that's really difficult, but none of us is responsible for everything that happened in the generations past. And I think the idea of a day of thankfulness is beautiful. And it was actually first declared that nationally by President Lincoln, who was hoping in 1863, I think, to kind of reunite the country that had been destroyed by, so many polarities as we see today, and thought here would be a way to celebrate unity instead. And I think it got, it sort of got wrapped up in the whole myth of the friendly Indians who were just so eager to give us their land because we're just such great colonial people. We can not ignore that, but maybe not make that the focus of our day. But think about the thankfulness for, as you said, family and friends. I gotta say, Thanksgiving dinner, one of my favorite meals of all the year.
Yeah.
Can we maintain that and maybe have, what about a symbolic, I think about how sometimes in some traditions, when someone has died, there's always a place set for them with a candle on the plate at a feast or a gathering. Maybe we do a candle at our Thanksgiving plate and say, this is for all those who are lost and the things that we regret, and we're going to move on forward, but we're inviting everyone to the table with us, or something like that.
Yeah,
Would that change it up? Would that be healing? I don't know.
Yes. I think that would be helpful.
Reed, you have a comment?
Yes, I a couple of years ago read or went through a little program called Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. And she, in that now a book, talks about the goal of being a good ancestor, that should be our goal. So, in a way, it's like, well, here's where we are. We're somebody's ancestor. We don't know who they are yet. So we can start trying to be their good ancestor as opposed to some of our not so good ancestors.
Yeah, that's a very powerful viewpoint. And as elders, that's something we should be thinking about. What is our legacy as ancestors? Evellyn.
Well, I have a question that I don't know how to get the answer to, but I am really interested in how Thanksgiving is being taught to our elementary children in Bainbridge Island School District. And I know how mine was, man. We had the Pilgrims and the Indians and the big stage play, and I'm just interested. I don't have any young children, and I really don't know anyone with them. But if anyone does know, I think it would be very interesting to know how it is being taught now.
Well, that is an interesting question. And my grandkids are in at Island School, and I know they are taught a pretty, I think they would be taught a more realistic history. But I also think that they probably talk about the same things we are saying, like it's still a good way to celebrate family and celebrate bounty and be grateful for what we have. I'm sure that's thrown in. But in the public schools, that is a great question, because the public schools have adopted this inclusion and diversity programming and are asked to be teaching truth about all kinds of things. So I would imagine that they, but I can find out. That's a great question.
Please do. It'd be very interesting to know.
It looked like there was another question. Yeah. It
Yes.
says Joel Sackett, but you're clearly not Joel.
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm Susan. This conversation reminded me of an event that I did a number of years ago. It featured Desmond Tutu speaking to hundreds of people around Thanksgiving. And instead of calling it Thanksgiving, we called it Thanks for Giving.
Mm.
And the idea was for people to think about, there were too many people to share thoughts really, because he was the main event. But we did ask people to think about what they can do to give to others during this holiday, and we called it Thanks for Giving. And it was a few days before Thanksgiving, and we also served a Thanksgiving dinner. So it was a kind of a twist on it, but still was about Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's a beautiful idea too. And what a great topic for conversation at the family table. What would we like to give? You know, what
And what a great opportunity to hear Desmond Tutu speak.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was in person. It was not on Zoom.
Right? Pre-Zoom. Remember that, everybody?
Yeah, right.
But I think it's a great point that, when we're gathered in our abundance, in our plenty, and in our privilege, it's a wonderful time to be able to say, what can we give? How do we move the community forward? How do we pass on our example? And what kind of example are we passing on? All those are great questions to bring to the family, I would say. Did I see another hand? I thought somebody had their hand up. Oh, okay. Bonnie?
Oh, well, this is a little a little aside, but one thing we used to do was always go around the table and have everybody tell what they were thankful for and all that. And I have a daughter and a son. They were grown, of course, at this time, and they were kind of opposite politically. So my daughter, to stir things up, said she was really thankful for Michael Moore. Well, that started a discussion, let me tell you. She was trying to stick it to him. It was just, it was fun, but everybody.
Well, it does kind of raise the question of holidays and families and how to kind of come together in a way that is not not combustible.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not possible in the Chan family, but anyway.
Yeah. Who knows?
Maybe
We
not.
always felt that inviting a few people who are not direct family members kind of made it a little more comfortable. Don,
Yeah.
it looked like you had your hand up there.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if anyone has heard whether Thanksgiving meal is going to be offered this year to anyone who wants to partake at the, what is the name of that building? Sportsman Club building.
I can answer that question. He's asking, is there going to be a Sportsman Club holiday meal? Woo! There went some lights. Is there going to be a Sportsman Club holiday meal? And the answer is no. They're not doing an in-person meal, but Island Volunteer Caregivers is looking to distribute with the Senior Center and some other community groups a meal on Thanksgiving morning.
Wonderful. Is there a way we can participate in that?
You just signed up.
Sign me up, Reed. One year, I don't know if you remember, we opened up the Eagle Harbor Church Community Hall and had a giant, oh gosh, we had 75 people because we just invited everybody to come from the Super Supper crowd, and that was so much fun. I think we had 8 turkeys and and
Yeah, so that's where they're going to be assembling the meals, is at Eagle Harbor, and then distributing them by car.
Makes good sense. Betsy, you had your hand up. No, you were just waving. Arizona just makes you float, I guess. It's so nice and warm and dry there. But, we still, there is the whole issue about how do we heal some of these incredible discomforts. And I think about our neighbors, Suquamish people, who certainly don't have the same sense of Thanksgiving Day being a wonderful day that we do. I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, and believe me, we were fed the friendly Indians story all the way through. And it wasn't until I think college that I started to really hear very different versions. And that was one of those pieces I think for a lot of us, where you start to get into the greater world and get outside of your smaller culture and start hearing, oh, you mean there are other people in the world who are not exactly like me? That is a wonderful time. And these are great discussions, uncomfortable or not. Michael Moore, fabulous topic for starting up, right? A way to look at so many things. And I know I've said before, but I think one of the key pieces for all of us when we get into this kind of inclusion work or equity work is being prepared to be uncomfortable, because and one of the pieces about holidays is we don't want to be uncomfortable. We just want to have fun. And I think we can do both. I think we can have a beautiful day and true celebration, and also have some thoughtfulness woven into it. And that would go for a number of holidays. Evellyn.
And just speaking of what you just said, a number of holidays, I thought the calendar piece was incredible. I downloaded it with all of that information. we could be having a celebration every day of the year.
Yeah, pretty much. But I thought it was really interesting that calendar also included the traditional Thanksgiving story about the friendly Indians giving up, bringing the food. So I thought, oh, this is so interesting.
Did it?
Yes, it
Oh,
did.
I didn't read it that thoroughly. I
did.
just copied it. I thought it was so incredible. Yeah. Oh,
Eleanor.
dear. Oh, dear.
Eleanor, you had your hand up.
Yes, well, I hate to be the outlier here, but there is a small measure of truth in the thoughtful Indian story, which is the settlers would never have survived their first winter in New England. No, never mind this, Jamestown, which precedes it. There's a lot of complications, but they would never have survived it if they hadn't had assistance from the Indians, both in terms of helping them to farm in this new place and also sharing their bounty with them. So I don't want to forget that part. I don't also want us to get stuck on Thanksgiving, which is everybody's favorite holiday because it has no religious content, because we can wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving because, however small the measure, everyone has something to be thankful for. The hard ones, it seems to me, are the ones that are coming up, especially over the winter, where virtually every religion has a holiday, and that it has a religious content which may be meaningful to us or not, because it's our religion or it's not. Thanksgiving we can all share. That's the beauty of it. The other holidays raise the question of how you are respectful of other people's traditions, without abandoning your own. And how, especially we, and I think of this in terms of the senior center, how we can do it when you want to celebrate, but the celebrations encompass a whole lot of different beliefs or traditions and ideas. And, so I just got the Sarah Boynton Everyday a Holiday calendar, which has, wonderful holidays like Talk Like a Pirate Day or, silly things, which I think is going to help me get through the next year, but maybe isn't the solution to our problem.
Boy, yeah, this is really a dense topic in a lot of ways. I did want to point out, though, there's a wonderful, did not get you to the link. I forgot to add this one, but there's an interview with Daniel Silverman, who was the author of a book called This Land is Their Land, The Wampanoag Indians, Plymouth Colony and the Troubled History of Thanksgiving. And it was a Smithsonian article a few years ago. So if you look up Smithsonian and Daniel Silverman, you probably find it. Excuse me. Sorry. But it's a complicated story, and it has a lot of nuance. And I think it's one that really deserves some thoughtful conversation. And again, maybe with the family. But you're right that when we try to do more public holidays, I kind of run into, are we doing cultural appropriation if we try to put out lanterns for Diwali? Sorry. The wind is stirring up. My house, it's not perfectly sealed, and every now and then this wave of pollen or something comes my way. I think one of the pieces we have to look at too is yeah, you're right. How do we celebrate realistically? Are we just, being, what would you call it, whitewashing a holiday? Is it a cultural appropriation? Are we sincerely exploring? And what's the point?
We had a few years back a controversy about saying happy holiday versus Merry Christmas. And I think we hopefully passed that, because it's difficult to determine what the person is celebrating just by looking at them. So I think the general idea is maybe have a pleasant holiday, but what other common things can you say without being able to determine which specific holiday is somebody celebrating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and is it our business what they're celebrating? But what is universal? I think that's one of the things to think about is what are the common themes to all these celebrations? Certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of the winter holidays seem to be about light, the loss of light, the return of light, the hope of spring. the solemnity of winter and darkness. You know, the world shut down in the northern parts of the world in wintertime for a lot of people who didn't have abundant supplies. And so, you know, you really didn't do a lot. I think this was a pondering time. We've lost that quality, I think. But it's something to think about. Like, that's the root of many of these holidays. And why is that not something we should look to again, or look to develop a little bit more? Let there be light. Maybe that's what we say. Hey, happy holidays, let there be light. I don't think anybody would argue with that, but who knows, right? Laura, are you putting your hand up?
Yeah, I think somebody else had their hand up before I did. I think Susan did.
That's okay.
Oh, go for it, Susan.
No, you would, in passing, said, why is it our business what holiday someone is celebrating? But why not ask about what holiday so we can learn more and connect with people? I don't think it's a bad question, but a lot of people might agree that it's not proper to ask that. And I think we've gotten into a overly politically correct society where there's so many things we don't want to talk about that I think it's ending up being harmful.
Oh, that's a good point, Susan. Thank you. Laura, you had a comment. That is a really good point.
No, I hate to follow it with my silliness, but you know, one of the things Bonnie and I celebrate is you know, solstice, and so we bring back the light, and so you know, and part of this was living in Alaska for decades, you know. So, but you know, we on solstice we you know, bring out some big candles, and every night, you know, we light them, and we just, you know, bring back the light, and then that's. I like having the holidays have that sort of natural connection, both the winter and spring. Just, I don't know, that just makes sense to me. I like that kind of rhythm to it. I'm not a particularly religious, well, not at all religious person. So I like having ways to mark the seasons that take that out of it.
Yeah, one of the coolest traditions that I experienced a couple times is that on the solstice, on the winter solstice, every light in the house would be extinguished, everything turned off, everything unplugged, and have like an hour of darkness and in meditation, and then one candle is lit, and then a fire, and sort of gradually bring back the light. And I thought that was so moving to have that contrast. And silence is so rare. Silence and darkness, wow, that's very powerful. And whether you're religious or not, I think we all have something in us that responds to both darkness and light like that. And think, yeah, that's probably one of the most ancient ceremonies there is that we could still share in today, right? Oh, Eleanor, I see your hand.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. There is a reason to know what holidays other people are celebrating, because I learned when I was teaching and had a large number of foreign students that, you know, it really was not respectful to schedule an exam or a presentation on Yom Kippur or Diwali, or a holiday that was terribly important to one or more of my students, but that I knew nothing about. And so, you know, I had to try to, and it was a little harder in those days, but still not impossible, to find out when those days were, and at least try to avoid scheduling important things on those days, and to understand if a student was not going to be there that day.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because that's right, to be respectful of those times and understand that other people's schedules are not the same as ours necessarily in terms of days off, or when they might not want to participate in something. I'm really interested in Yom Kippur as a Day of Atonement, because I feel like nationally that wouldn't hurt us a bit. And, you know, to sort of maybe have a Day of Atonement and then a Day of Thanksgiving, like Halloween is All Souls and All Saints, right? Like the October 31st was in 993 or something, became All Souls Day, and then November 1st was declared All Saints Day, and they're kind of matching holidays, right? And maybe a Day of Atonement and a Day of Thanksgiving could somehow be coupled. We could start something a little different.
They tend to be somewhat apart in terms of the calendar, but you mentioned, Halloween. I think most of us saw recently that one of the schools in the Seattle area has made their annual Halloween party or parade or something like that because certain groups they felt were not able to participate. It was not people either because of their income or their race or something like that, that Halloween was not acceptable. So it became so. Now, I don't know about around here, we're only visiting, but we have grandchildren here and they love to meet all their friends and neighbors to go out. And even if they don't wear a very fancy outfit, so this sort of super sensitivity sometimes, at least in my mind, sort of crosses a line someplace. And I think this kind of discussion we're having today allows us to, look behind just the cover of the book, but see what the words say inside.
Excellent point. Are we too PC to enjoy anything? Where's the line on that? And I think part of that, what happens is we have a cultural hesitance because we're aware that we're ignorant and we don't want to do the wrong thing or don't want to step on somebody's toes or don't want to accidentally be offensive, though of course we probably are. So education, like having this kind of conversation, I feel like open conversation is a lost art because everybody likes to hear a lecture of an expert because then it's true, whatever you're going to hear, right? But if it's a conversation, you risk being wrong. You risk, right? But we need it so much. We need the fluidity of these kind of open-ended, you're not wrong. Whatever you're thinking is what you're thinking. Let's share our thoughts. Reed.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about this cultural appropriation thing, and Anika is going to be here later this week to do a Day of the Dead, a Dia de los Muertos art project at the Senior Community Center in advance of the ofrenda that the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art is going to hold. And so that is, I think, a way to honor tradition and yet participate in it, even if it isn't explicitly your own.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, actually. I love the whole ofrenda thing because, again, our Halloween started off being spooky, fear of death, fear of the dark, fear of the skeletons, fear of the ghosts. You wore costumes to confuse the ghosts so they missed and went somebody else's house and haunted them. But the ofrendas feel like it's such a celebration of love for the dead are dead, right? And I have really embraced that myself. Plus, I like to do outdoor ofrendas, like a nature ofrenda, using foliage and flowers and making lining pathways. I've done this at the library for years now, lining the pathway with beautiful leaves and making little pockets of drying things. It's like farewell to the death of summer. It's a beautiful concept to me to embrace the lost as in a much more whole way and invite grief into our life and invite death is as normal as life, right? So I just feel like the whole thing of the ofrenda, imagine having a picnic. Like Memorial Day when I was growing up, people did maybe go to the home place and tidy up the family graves, but it wasn't like a big party. And I love the idea that it is a big party. Has anyone else had experience with ofrendas? Not so much. Well, I would really encourage you to go to the museum and view it, but I'm planning to bring my granddaughter to Anika's program on Wednesday, where you can bring a photocopy of a picture of someone you love who's dead, or you can make paper flowers and you cover a votive candle, and then those will be added to the beautiful ofrenda at the museum, which is a kind of a shrine and decorated mostly with flowers and pictures and special objects. And a lot of people have started coming and bringing their own things to add to it. And it's such a rich, beautiful tradition. I'd love to see more people getting involved with it. Maybe when Anika finishes their lunch, they can let us know a little bit more about how the participation might work, but
It just did put a link in the chat for the BEMA website, which has information about it.
great. Thank you, Anika.
I'm done with my lunch. I can turn my camera on so you can see my face. And yeah, you're all invited to that event or activity on the 27th at the Senior Center. It's from 1 to 4. And as Anne mentioned, we'll be decorating candles that then will be placed on the altar at the museum. And that altar stays up for a week and is decorated with some art from local artists of, Latinx heritage, and as well as the community offerings that slowly through the week get added, and you can sort of see this beautiful celebration of people's lives and memories grow as the time passes, which is the part that I really appreciate the most. So the other thing is, if you are able to make it to that art activity, you can email us, and I'll pop the email in the chat if you have an image of someone that you'd like us to print out and place on the altar for you. So yeah, I'll go off and copy that email. But yeah, all of you and your participation and is welcomed, and we'll love to see you there.
I love that this is really starting to be a local tradition, because it offers opportunities for all of us to learn from it and adopt the pieces that might fit us. Like for me, it's going outside in my garden and making ofrendas up all the garden paths. For you, it might be something quite different, but there's so many beautiful pieces of it to kind of think about. And I don't know if somebody would feel like that's cultural appropriation, or if it's just a generosity of sharing.
That's something that I think that we think about a lot at the museum as, a public organization that's inviting people to take part in this. And for us, the part that is important is that there are community members involved in organizing it, where that celebration is part of their heritage and their culture, and that we're inviting other people who might not be as familiar or connected to the holiday to, engage with it in a way that is respectful and appropriate for everyone to celebrate.
Along those lines, it might be, I don't know what you think about this, but if you celebrate a holiday during the winter that is other than Christmas, which we know a lot about, maybe it would be great to think about how we might represent some of those other holidays at the Senior Center.
When I did live in Anchorage, I had a favorite yoga teacher, and she one year invited pretty much everybody in the studio over to her mother's house. Her mother was out sort of in the woods, and they had a bonfire, and just, what a perfect way to mark solstice.
Mm-hmm. As long as it's not pouring rain.
Yeah, that's true. Or snowing or whatever, but.
I think the Christmas holiday is problematic for some people because it's such a culturally dominant idea. And yet there's one classic example of a holiday that really shifted from being a religious holiday to becoming really a very secular one. And that materialism versus spiritualism kind of sets up some conversations in our house anyway. Has anybody else got ideas about how to, I think deconstructing Christmas was a really big topic for a long time when my kids were younger, and we were trying to get away from the whole materialistic, how many presents can you possibly cram into a house? And
yeah, we celebrate Christmas at our house, but we have a price list. It's like $25 or less.
Oh,
and homemade is better than any of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of helped refocus the gift giving as being more of a gratitude exchange.
And there's a pressure that can build up to, who do you owe a present to? And I've heard people say, I'm just going to leave I'm going to go away somewhere because I can't handle it. I can't afford to give presents to too many people. And, nobody needs anything anyway. And you get kind of grumpy about it instead of like a gift of the heart of feeling like, here's something we really want to do. In my family, we've settled a lot on gifts of time. So for instance, I give my son and his wife 12 sleepovers for the grandchildren a year. Right? The kids can come and they can have a weekend or a couple night or whatever to themselves. That's
very generous.
It is. It's actually great because I love, it's been fun. And I'm sure it won't last forever, but for now, the first year we did it, I think they used 6 of them in January. But, parents need some time off too. So that's a great thing grandparents can offer if we're in proximity to each other. But I love, making things, right? Though, there's a limit to how many scarves and hats people will accept from a determined knitter. I found that out.
I think this discussion you had about Thanksgiving might be appropriate for that as well. But I think this discussion really comes down to, what are you really celebrating, regardless of which holiday we're talking about, be it Christmas, Hanukkah. It really doesn't matter. What's really the backstory really should have a discussion way before the holiday. I mean, if you're going to prepare for it, as most people prepare one way or another, be it buying trees or getting candles, whatever we're talking about, the backstory should be discussed in terms of what this is really about. And then the idea of gifts sort of become a minor element within the discussion.
I think it's really important to consult, as things change. I mean, as children get older, et cetera, families change. And it seems helpful to consult and say, okay, what do we want to do this year? What's important to us, and really fine tune it after maybe being through, whirlwinds when we were younger of just doing things because it seemed like the thing to do. I think as elders, we have an opportunity to refocus and rechange, look at how we want to celebrate just about anything, really. So
we've all been encouraged by the last few years, especially to rethink a lot of things. And I know sometimes I hear that people are getting a little, what would you call it? Reassessment fatigue.
Yeah. I was just thinking in our own family, it seems like the traditions that we have had, which are fairly simple, like a Christmas brunch and having certain foods, have become more important than the present giving, which is nice.
It is nice.
Yeah.
And I think, there is that feeling sometimes is like, is nothing simple anymore? And I think the real answer is actually no, and it never was, but we didn't have to know that. So, again, getting used to a certain amount of discomfort is probably really wholesome for us. But I think it's also really important to remember that we can also be joyful and we can also totally enjoy each other and make pools of happiness in our daily life. I think that's hugely important too.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, a holiday Zoom is an interesting new thing, isn't it? That I know families that are scattered, like Joel and Susan were saying their kids are 1,000 miles away or whatever. You have the opportunity to do this kind of thing, right? And it's not the same as sitting at the table together, but I know people who do have dinner parties, Zoom dinner parties or Zoom cocktail parties or whatever. It's like we've learned to stretch.
That's really what we do. I mean, we have children here on the island in Utah and in Arizona, so it makes it a little difficult. So what we do, if we can't bring everybody together for the holidays, is invite friends or workers or whatever to our home. Our most interesting Thanksgiving was held at the American Indian Museum in Washington, D.C. They were putting on a Thanksgiving dinner there. So that was kind of an interesting experience, but then many years ago. I'm not sure it's still happening, but it's if you ever get to Washington, it's a place I strongly recommend you attend. And unlike the rest of the world, virtually all the museums in Washington are free. So you can put your money to use someplace else. But I will invite you to all come to my future state and enjoy our riches.
Yeah, that is a richness. Has anyone else had that privilege of being at the North American Indian Museum in DC? Oh, you have, Betsy?
I didn't go for Thanksgiving, but we went for a day and it was just amazing. It's a beautiful museum, definitely worth seeing. I mean, the whole thing is put together by Native Americans or indigenous people of North and South America and Central America. And it's just amazing, beautiful place. Great experience.
Closer to home, we of course have the Suquamish Museum, which is an incredible, beautiful place too, with a very intricate exhibit. If you just, the walls are painted with story. And so, you can take an hour or more to make your way around it. But that's another kind of cool thing to do maybe on Thanksgiving week, is to go to the Suquamish Museum and join for $10 and and expand your sense of our neighbors, right, who have inhabited this land for 16,000 years, and think about the traditions that they might be bringing to the Thanksgiving.
Well, and I was going to say, in case anybody chooses to drive to the future state of the District of Columbia, go through Oklahoma. There's a new, really fantastic Native American museum that's just opened in Oklahoma City. It's the only reason to stop there. Otherwise, just keep driving.
Wasn't there a recent treaty revision that said that most of Oklahoma now actually belongs to one of the tribes?
That's not exactly what it is, but yeah, there was a revision recently that had a significant impact on the tribes that were imported to Oklahoma.
Oh, right.
I think primarily from North Carolina, if I remember correctly.
Well, actually, North Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, and Mississippi, I think, was also.
Good old Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
Right. We're national heroes.
Known as the 5 civilized tribes: Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole. That's all I know.
I want to thank everybody. I love these conversations, and yeah, it's always worth exploring, and it's really lovely to hear from everybody. So thanks for your participation, and hopefully we'll see you in November.